Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast. More Blake 7 of the summer. Episode 5, we're almost halfway through. Well, we're not really, because there's 13 episodes, which means episode 7 would be the halfway point, but we're getting there, aren't we? Not that it's a chore, is it? Well, perhaps it is, because this episode is called The Web. Now, Callie's not been on board very long, at all. People are deciding whether they trust her or not, and that's absolutely fair enough. However, she starts to sabotage the spaceship. Now, I know this could be what she used to do when she was herself, sabotaging things left and right and centre and going on like that. Yes, sabotage is what she's trained in, and that's fine. Oh, sabotage. She wasn't even a Marine. Leave it there. I'm sorry, this is not a musical podcast. I am not that kind of person. What I am is a Blake 7 fan, and I can forgive most things. I really can. But The Web contains a series of things that rank it with, well, kill the moon in a Doctor Who kind of a way. I'm not going to apologise for BBC special effects. I'm going to see them for what they are. People were trying their best. They really were. But the effects come from the script, and the script was a bit dodgy. So, Callie's wandering around the ship, sabotaging a few things. Fair enough. People don't know her well enough to know that she's acting out of character. However, the Liberator starts speeding up, getting faster and faster and faster, but showing none of the G-forces that we saw in the earlier episodes. I suppose it's getting faster slowly, so the inertia really isn't. Leave it there. The physics don't matter in Blake 7. At least the spaceships don't whoosh past the cameras every 5 minutes, or rumble overhead. So the Liberator is rushing from point A to point B, and they don't know where it is. And when they finally manage to shut the systems down, well, the Liberator seems to be caught in some sort of web in space. It's not the Great Intelligence, it's nothing to do with Doctor Who. Let it go, let it go. I'm in a musical mood and I'm apologising to no one. The spaceship is travelling on its way, and then it's stuck fast in this web. There's a massive power drain, and it just can't go anywhere. And then, in a very Star Trek-y kind of a way, Jenna decides to speak in a strange voice. Yes, the BBC effects department kicking in. So, Blake, on instructions received, decides to teleport down to the planet below. Of course, this whole episode had opened on the planet below, where they'd done this lovely panning shot from outside, where it was a bit green, a bit foresty, and then there was this lovely, what looked like an adventure park, big plastic domes, or some sort of glamping experience where you would go in through these domes. We've all seen them advertised, we've all been tempted, and we've all gone, no. Despite the fact that I actually do go camping, but that's too much personal information, because what we actually need is to talk about Blake 7 back on topic. So, this dome thing has got two people fast asleep who give each other the sort of sci-fi hugs that you get in these situations, and you've also got the most disappointing effect up to date. Yes, sucking your head through a hole and having a little body and then having bubbles round a fish tank in front of you might sound like a perfectly reasonable special effect. It's not. Now, I know these days they'd use green screen and you'd end up something like the face of Bo, but which I know is a practical effect before you email in. Here you've got an actor with his face stuck through a piece of cardboard with a tiny little body drawn underneath him, which is fairly comical at the best of times, and then it's surrounded by a fish tank with air bubbles blowing through it. He's clearly the villain of the piece. He's all mind. It's one of those what happens to people. I'm sure this is how Nation actually pictured the Daleks inside of their costumes. So Blake beams down to the planet. I'm sorry, teleports down. and he meets up with what appears to be the survivors of some centuries-old experiment. They're running genetic engineering things. This experiment run by Callie's people, the R&R. That joke isn't actually going to go anywhere, just in case you're expecting some sort of payoff at some point. But the fact that they were part of the R&R means that it's why they could communicate with Callie. Fair enough. She is kind of, well, the liability of the crew. You would expect her to have some sort of, defense mechanism against this sort of thing, but all she wants to do is reach out to lonely people across space and time and give them all big hugs. As a terrorist, that's not particularly a good idea. So, these people have been running genetic experiments and they've created Deep Roy. No, they've created a bunch of, well, let's call them little people. I don't know what the correct term is anymore, but that seems to be the one that you see on TLC or any of those other channels with, 7 Little Johnstons or The Little Couple. Dwarves used to be an acceptable thing. Midgets, I'm sure, was actually a medical term at one point, but you just don't know anymore. And as a bloke who is just, the statistical norm, I always forget this sort of thing. Political correctness might not have gone mad, it's just being nice to people. But unless you actually can go up to someone and go, excuse me, what do you like being called? And the answer is usually Dave. Well, that's only if they're actually called Dave, obviously. Then that's fine. So, what you've got is a bunch of little actors in rubber costumes. And I know that one of them is, I suspect, Deep Roy. Because he did a lot of Blake 7 work, and I know that later on he plays somebody called the Clute, but that's another story for another time. You've basically got a lot of little people running around in rubber suits with big floppy heads on. They've been genetically created to be slaves. You've got the whole slavery storylines that we've all dealt with 1,000 times again, Star Trek, Doctor Who, sci-fi in general, and of course, not forgetting the ever-popular real life. Slavery, not as popular as it once was, but it still exists in places. See Ood, see far too much literature. Creating a race for this, and of course you've got Humans on Channel 4, one of the world's most slow programmes of all time. Has anyone else watched Humans? You could watch the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of each episode, condense it into one programme, and you've still got exactly the same amount of narrative. Things only happen at the beginning, at the end. It moves at the same snail's pace as a detective drama from Sweden or Denmark. Yes, and basically Humans is, well, has anyone seen Blade Runner? Yes. Well, we can tick those boxes. Had anyone else seen AI? Yes, right. Put them both in the same room. It's actually quicker to watch both of those films than it would be to watch the entirety of Humans. And then just, forget it, it's not important. What is important, of course, is Blake 7. You've got a race of creatures called the Decimers. Apparently they're good at 10 things, but they're all evolving out of control, and they want to wipe them out. These are the experimenters. It's a bit sort of demons-y. But of course, the two people doing the whole project are also genetic creations. They're all creations of the thing in the jar. Dun dun dun. Of course, he's ugly and is therefore evil. That's the way Blake 7 and sci-fi seems to work. Attractive people are good guys. See Servalan. Yeah, perhaps that doesn't quite work, but he is reasonably ugly, and therefore that's what happens. He's the baddie, he's the actual villain of the piece. And of course, he's got some sort of fungicide to kill the space web. Yeah, it's the space web itself that I've actually got issues with, and the fact that there is a fungicide. If they'd called it something else, I probably could have lived with it. And that's probably my real issue with the story. It's the giant space web. Because surely if your spaceship's caught in something, it has to be anchored to something else. Otherwise, in space, you just keep going with it stuck to the front of your ship. Or is that not how it works? So Blake agrees to give people their energy cells that they need in order to survive. But the Decimers decide to break through and, well, in all honesty, goes a bit pear-shaped. And in order to finish the whole thing off, Blake and Avon just teleport back to the ship and head off in with, exit stage left with pursuit ships behind them. Yeah, not the best story. Perhaps one of the most sci-fi stories so far, but it's more pedestrian-y sci-fi. It goes away from the whole we're a bunch of terrorists thing and back into the realm of sci-fi, possibly just to keep the kids going. So does Blake 7 succeed because it splits itself in two very distinct areas? The political infighting drama or the let's deal with the dodgy aliens thing? Because until Callie turns up, and the fact that there's a space battle going on in the distance, there's just chat about space battles and aliens. It could have just been an entire universe of human beings. Well, not a universe, but a galaxy. And that is a bit more Red Dwarf, but it's something I quite like. So there you go. One more story down in our Summer of Blake 7. And I'll speak to you next time about the rather excitingly titled Seek, Locate, Destroy. Isn't that something Daleks shout? Yeah, let's not hold that against them, shall we? Episode 6. So until next time, be seeing you.
You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast, available on RSS, iTunes, Stitcher, Audio Boom and Tumblr. Doctor Who and its associated works are copyright of the BBC. No infringement is intended. You can contact the show, donate, buy merchandise or find out more about my other projects by visiting the Tin Dog Podcast homepage and clicking on the links. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance. On the 5th of September 2015, Hooverville will return. The biggest little Doctor Who convention in the whole of the UK is proud to present several fantastic guests. First off is the Colin Baker, a man who needs absolutely no introduction. Guests also include the author Jenny Colgan, responsible for Dark Horizons and Time Trips, Richard Marson, the man behind JNT, The Life and Scandalous Times, and the brand new book Drama and Delight, the biography of Verity Lambert, Dan Starkey, the man behind the mask when it comes to Commander Strax, and of course Ian the Elf in the Christmas special, Terence Dix, one of the men behind the Third Doctor and more Target novelisations than you can shake a stick at, the actor David Benson, from Robot of Sherwood, Iris Wildtime and the Scarifiers, Matthew Waterhouse, yes, Adric, Michael Pickwood, the current production manager on Doctor Who, and Karen Louise Hollis, author of The Man Behind the Master, the biography of Anthony Ainley. More guests may be added, but either way, that's a fantastic lineup. Visit the Derby Quad website on www.derbyquad.co.uk and follow the links. Saturday the 5th of September 2015. See you there.
Snyder.